Hello, everyone, and good whatever beautiful moment of this wonderful day you are enjoying on your time zones. And welcome to yet another conversation part of our April series. We will be talking today about strategic onboarding. And my name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co host for the next hour. We have Jessa taking care of us backstage, and we have an amazing lineup of speakers. Before I will ask Jessa to bring them up on the stage, I will encourage everybody in the audience, just drop us in the comments, maybe a quick note to let us know where you're watching us from or where you're listening to us from. It's always so great to see that, one, technology is working, and two, that we literally can travel around the world through your notes. I see comments coming in, so that's great. And we have Spain, we have Portugal. And Jessa, if you could just please bring the speakers up on the stage. And wow, we have a full house today. And we will try to make the best and most out of a very, very short hacking HR hour that we have ahead of us. And you already know the drill. What I will do, I will start by taking the e-mic around the room. And today we will do it counterclockwise. And I will ask you to first shortly introduce yourselves. And also, how would you define the success of an effective onboarding in one word? I will give you a few seconds to think about it, just enough to continue to welcome people in the audience and to extend the same question to them. How would you define the success of an effective onboarding in one word? And also, please, as we move forward with our conversation, consider it open to you as well. So use the chat generously and let us know your thoughts, your opinions, your stories around the topic. And this is the best way to keep this community growing and learning from each other. So, Jamie, I hope you're ready because you will be our pioneer today. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Thanks, Manola. Appreciate you being here and leading us today through this conversation. My name is Jamie Conrad. I'm the VP of People at Trust Radius. I've been with them for about 3 years, going on 3 years now, and we're a decision-making platform for business technology. So if you're trying to figure out the right HRIS system, the right payroll system, etc., we can help you with that. My one word for a successful, effective onboarding would be ingrained.
Ingrained. Thank you so very much. Sophie, welcome. Good to see you.
Hi, everybody around the world. My name is Sophie Lee. I'm the founder of Sophie Lee Global. I'm a people leader, advisor, and executive coach. I've spent the past 20 years advising companies from Fortune 500 to startup environments and the leaders how to operate globally with confidence and success. I'm super passionate about this topic because onboarding is the very first stage of engaging employee experience. My one word for effective onboarding is retention, because when we do it right, that's the outcome we're going to get.
Thank you very much. Agostina, welcome.
Hi, thank you all. So my name is Agostina Berni. I was born and raised in Argentina, and I'm a global HR leader with more than 20 years of progressive experience implementing talent solutions for business expansion and transformation at high growth multinationals such as Google, Red Hat, and most recently, Eventbrite. As I said, until very recently, I was a global senior HRBP for the product and design organizations at Eventbrite, which included partnering with the chief product officer and his direct leaders to design and implement strategic HR initiatives to boost employee engagement, retention, and productivity in a very fast-paced and competitive environment. And this topic is definitely near and dear to me. And if I had to choose one, I'll be a little bit rebellious there. Minola, I will choose two words. For me, it definitely has to do, effective onboarding has to do with productivity, but also it has to do with engagement. So for me, it would be the two of them. We need an employee that is ready to provide results and deliver, but we also want someone that feels integrated and engaged with his leader and the rest of the team.
Thank you very much, Agostina. Good to have you with us in this conversation. And Carol, welcome. You're making our panel complete today. Good to have you.
Thanks, Manola. Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Fishman-Cohen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of iRelaunch, and we focus on people returning to work after taking career breaks, could be very long career breaks. So I have a customized version of onboarding that we focus on that also impacts people who are coming from other backgrounds. And I was going to say retention, but I'll say comfortable. We want people to be comfortable, to be themselves and to feel like they belong, and also be in an environment where they're comfortable asking questions and not feeling like anyone is going to think a question or a conversation is dumb or reflects negatively on them.
Such a great first round and powerful words all around. Now, before we jump into the technicalities, I would really love to create a bit of an outline, a bit of a context for our topic. So my question would be along the lines of, with everything that has been continuously changing around us and within workplaces, and also as we hear more and more often, within how people relate to their work and what they want out of their work and the meaning and the purpose of work in their life. What are some of the key topics that you see drive the conversations around onboarding? I was thinking about calling out the opportunities and the challenges, but I don't want to embed judgment in the conversation. What are some of the focus areas, some of the key topics within the onboarding conversations that you are part of? And I always go diagonally. So Sophie, I will ask you to lead us, and then everybody, unmuting competition officially open. You build your own conversation. So Sophie, please.
Yeah, I think, the first thing is really about how you can create that amazing day one experience and almost pre-day one experience. Because today in this remote, virtual, hybrid, or global environment, not everybody sits in the same location. I've had, a lot of leaders, their employees sit in a different part of the world, very different time zone. So how do you engage them before that initial day one, so then they understand what to expect? The last thing that people want to feel anxious about, right, is before their day one, where's my computer, what I'm going to do on my first day, who I'm going to meet, and what conversations I'm going to have. So it's really about that day one readiness, preparing that for it to be an amazing experience for all the new hires.
Thank you. I see we lost Agostina there for a second, but fingers crossed she can join us soon again. Who would like to follow? Jamie.
Yeah, I'll go next. I think there's a lot of conversation around the differences in onboarding between on-site, hybrid, and remote, and trying to adjust to the different ways that people are coming into work. Your candidate experience and your first couple of days, your onboarding experience, like Sophie was saying, that amazing first day, this is your chance to make a great first impression. But when we talk about an effective onboarding for lasting change and long-term engagement, you have to also lean into the conversations that are happening around the manager, right? So how does that hiring manager then take this, amazing experience, 5-star experience that HR and the recruiting team have set up for this new hire, and have a seamless handoff that then takes it from culture and community to culture, community, and productivity within the different aspects of the way we work now.
Carol, I see you looking for the unmute, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. So I I concur with what Sophie and Jamie have already emphasized. I guess I'd also include community to an extent. Sometimes, people are coming in cohorts. Sometimes they're coming in on their own, and whether that's a virtual or in-person event, it can feel differently. And if it's virtual, to remember that we don't have those same kinds of experiences where everyone's walking out of a meeting together and you can say, hey, what did that person mean when they were referring to X? You instead might have to actually make an appointment, or maybe you're part of a thread where you can ask that question. So these dynamics, as Jamie's pointing out, are really different depending on what that environment is, in person versus hybrid. But I think community is important for people to know that there are other people that are going through this alongside with them, and that it's been thought out ahead of time by the employer about what that learning curve is going to look like over time. And also, I think it's a good idea to set up front what to expect, like what's going to happen on the first day, and then what's going to happen maybe during the next few days, and then longer term.
Agostina, welcome back.
Thank you, and apologies for that. So I'm resonating with what Carol and Jamie are saying. For me, there are three main themes that I see when it comes to onboarding. First of all, I would say the length. I see a lot of debate these days about how much or how long should the onboarding process take. And I know that there are some interesting statistics that say that only 43% of employees report that they received an onboarding that lasted more than a day, which is astonishing to me, to consider that an employee can effectively integrate and absorb what they need in just one day. So definitely the length is something that I consider when it comes to designing proactively this type of processes for success. The other thing would be content. What are the resources, the training, the materials we should be providing for equipping employees for success? From organizational materials to functional trainings and materials. Which is the right balance, right? Because again, another interesting statistic, on average, we have employees having to fill out 54 onboarding tasks in a given onboarding process, which again, it can feel very overwhelming as an employee is trying to get a grasp and understand the organization, his manager's style, and the team. So again, for me, balancing and identifying the right content is the second theme. And the third one is definitely, how do we make sure, especially in remote and hybrid organizations, that an employee can effectively integrate to the team and the culture? Considering that was, I would say, more fluid and organic when we had an office. How can we take that into a remote environment and creating intentional spaces for that culture and values and behaviors to emerge, right? So those are, for me, the things that I consider when thinking about onboarding these days.
Thank you. Carol, you want to add something?
I just want to quickly add, because I'm just thinking about how different onboarding is depending on the size and the complexity of the organization that someone is joining. And the idea that part of the onboarding, let's say it's a bigger organization, is to give the new person some context in terms of the role that they have and the area that they're working in and how it fits into what the larger mission or products or services is of their employer.
Great point. I was just wondering, we started to scratch this in our intro round, but why is effective onboarding so critical? What's the business case for effective onboarding? And Jamie, would you like to take this one first?
Yeah, the business case, I think, definitely leans into what Sophie was saying during that first round of retention. There's a lot of money that goes into finding the right candidate, making sure that we've got the right job, the right skills, and then bringing them in, the training, the learning curve, the time to productivity. There's just a large investment when we talk about bringing someone in. And so there's definitely a point in time where there's a return on that investment. And so the more effective the onboarding is, the quicker maybe we can get to that return on investment. And the longer we can keep that employee, then that feeds into our retention and hopefully lower turnover information or data as well. So I think it's important to consider that business case. But I also think that there's a morale aspect to that. Whenever someone leaves an organization, especially when we talk about regrettable turnover, there's a hit to the morale in some of those teams. And so you want to just do whatever you can to make sure you're providing that great start so that it's a place that they want to stay and they feel successful.
Thank you. Agostina.
I think I definitely resonate with what Jamie is saying. And to complement that retention piece, there are some numbers that can, add to that. If an employee has a positive onboarding experience during their first 90 days, they are 10 times more likely to stay. So definitely the numbers are saying, the business case for it. And also employees who receive effective onboarding feel 18 times more committed to their organization. So definitely this is a topic that we should, as HR leaders and business leaders, have in our agenda to ensure the sustainability of the organization and the retention of our employees.
Thank you. Carol, we can't hear you. I see you unmuted.
Okay, is that better?
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So I saw a comment in the comment section about, can you talk beyond like the first day, the first week? And when we're working on customized onboarding for people who are returning to work after a career break, it's also applicable to people in other situations, that the programming piece can last 6 months, and we have a check-in at the midpoint and a check-in at the end point of that programming piece. And it's really an opportunity to have a confidential one. We actually do it as an outside third party, so people can give us just the the absolute candid truth and be vulnerable without feeling like it's going to impact anything about their employment. But the idea is to get a status from people and hear about what's working and what's not working, and what might be helpful in one way or another with their experience. So I think that check-in at the midpoint and the endpoint and who is doing it will give you some valuable information. And then the other part in this is, again, coming back to community, when to have someone in the organization who's their mentor or their buddy who is checking in with them on a regular basis. And that's more of a long-term part of an onboarding program too.
And I want to add to what Carol just mentioned, right, is that continuity throughout the entire process and building that community. Because, it's just not a 1 day, 1 month, or 1 year event. Sometimes onboarding actually takes much longer, especially if you were to bring in some senior leaders or executives. And whenever we have a new team member, right, regardless what level it is, we're literally going through the kind of traditional, right, like the forming, storming, norming. Eventually, hopefully, we'll get to that performing stage. And, it will be such a missed opportunity if we cannot do this effectively after spending so much time and resources to bring in a new hire. The other thing I also want to mention about why effective onboarding is so important It's such a golden opportunity for us to turn a new hire into a raving fan about the company. Because when a new hire joins a company, right, their friends and community, everybody usually will have a conversation about how's your new job going? How are you liking the company? So it's such a golden opportunity, right, to put us in a position as employer of choice with those new hires by providing them this amazing experience.
Mm.
And there was also one other thing in the chat about evolving onboarding to meet ongoing and evolving business needs. And there's two aspects to that that I think is important. One is thinking about quality of hire and how that's being measured within the organization. The checkpoints or maybe surveys or scores on performance reviews. What is it that's important to your organization, and developing what quality of hire metrics are important to capture, so that you understand how effective you're being at bringing in the right candidates, onboarding them, and making sure that they're onboarded not just for productivity now, but what happens at 6 months, what happens at 1 year, at 18 months. And the other thing that I'll say to evolving onboarding is I think onboarding should be on your audit cadence, just like all the other things that you do for compliance. It's not a stagnant thing. And if you are really savvy at your onboarding, it should be personalized to that job role and that employee anyway. And so there's always going to be opportunities to shift, tweak, and improve your onboarding process. And I think a lot of your quality of hire information can feed into especially the business goals and the alignment with the strategy of the organization. And then that feeds back into your onboarding audit for the changes that you make going forward. So I think there's a couple different ways to look at that and to help with that.
I'm sure that each and every one of us, we can think back to a very recent situation when effective onboarding was placed under the exclusive ownership and accountability of HR. And it's very easy to do so. So I would invite every one of you, just take a few minutes, and can we look at the entire landscape of stakeholders for an effective onboarding? Who does what, and who bears accountability and ownership of what? And Agostina.
This is a great question, Minola. And actually, very recently, last year at Eventbrite, we decided to invest time and resources into piloting actually a new onboarding process for two regions that are aggressively growing for us, who were Spain and India. And that is one of the actual questions that came to the squad working on this project, and definitely is one that we addressed. So hiring managers, of course, they are main point of contacts for the employee, but also bodies, right? And not only one. It was decided that the employee would have preferably more than one body, so that they could get the different perspectives on the unwritten rules of the organization. And definitely the people operations team was important in terms of providing the infrastructure and the ecosystem, because we definitely leverage technology via Onboarder to ensure that both the employee and the hiring managers and the bodies would get recurrent alerts when it was time, in those moments of truth that we had identified through this 180-day onboarding process that we were piloting, should connect and do these check-ins, right? And so definitely the hiring manager skip level was another stakeholder that we thought of would be important to include into this process. and definitely some of the peers as well would be part of the process when we do social remote integration sessions, right? So those are the ones that come to mind. As I said, this is something that we decided as an organization to explore and pilot and see the results. So this is ongoing, very successfully, by the way. And I definitely encourage organizations to try, if they have a hypothesis that something can work better for them, to start small, select a region or a market or a population that would be interested in supporting this type of investments and innovations, and try it, see how it works.
Mm.
If,
Sophie.
if I may add to what Christina you just mentioned, right? Because it absolutely takes the entire village to make this happen. Not just within HR. I think we did a lot of heavy lifting during the hiring phase. But it's with IT, with the hiring manager, with the team. And what I have found really helpful in terms of additional support to the new hire experience is that there is a lot of technology tools that can be leveraged. And one of the companies that I worked at, there's this tool called Donuts that you can integrate into the Slack integration, and automatically, depending on the new hire's preference, it will match the new hire to meet with someone, literally anywhere potentially in the company, by choice, right? And so the new hire get to meet a lot of people on a weekly basis from different parts of the company that really broaden their perspective about what this whole ecosystem looks like. And another thing is, if in your company you have the luxury of having a workplace experience team that sometimes are on site, and they are really great at creating that community for new hires, to bring them together as a cohort or really build that ecosystem locally. If you have an office in a virtual environment, they can bring them all together, right? And what does that experience look like more catered in a virtual working environment? Because it's not like they have the luxury of being able to bump into someone in the office and strike out a random discussion or conversation. So in the remote environment, it's absolutely even more critical to be very intentional about it, how to create that engaging and inclusive experience.
Hmm.
I agree
Jamie.
with everything that's been said. I also think that there's a difference in ownership depending on the level of the employee that's coming in. There are some things that are standard and you'd want all employees to experience as part of onboarding, but I think that it shifts a little bit if you've got an executive level person coming in. The onboarding is going to look a little bit differently. They may or may not want a buddy in some of those situations. So I think it's just a matter again of being able to personalize it and think about the audience and the needs of the position and the new person coming in.
Carol, would you like to add anything?
Sure, just a few comments. Jamie's point about seniority is really, really important. So assuming we're not talking about the executive levels in this comment, consistency is important, especially if there are groups of people that are starting on a particular team or they're teams that are connected with each other at the same time. It could be that, it all comes down to the manager again. One manager might say there's a tech training module that you need to do, but you need to do it on your own time. And some other manager might say, we're going to block out a certain amount of time every week for you to work on your tech training. So like some sort of baseline consistency from one manager to another, which comes back to that topic of manager training and bringing the managers on board. Onboarding with the managers as part of the process.
Hmm. Well, believe it or not, we are right in the middle of our conversation. Time just flies by so quickly. A warm welcome to anyone who joined us a little bit later, and don't worry, you can watch everything that you missed by checking out the recording either through our LinkedIn space or the Hacking HR Lab .io platform. And I do want to make sure that in the second half of our conversation, we also give people some actionable insights and some steps that they can implement in their day to day. And I would really love if each of you can pick one um, type of onboarding. I'm not even sure that this wording is correct, but I will tell you what I have in mind. There's a mental post-it since the intro round on Carol talking about onboarding people who rejoin workplaces after breaks, especially after significant breaks. So I would ask Carol to talk about that. And I know Sophie has a soft spot for leadership onboarding, and I'm not dropping any spoiler alerts for Agostina and Jamie. But can each of you pick maybe one case study of onboarding and walk us through how it looks like, how it feels like, and how it sounds like? So, Carol, please.
All right. So in career reentry programming, there are two tracks that employers may take. Sometimes people are brought on board in what's called a mid-career returnship. It's an paid internship-like experience that lasts a certain period of time. And then there's a conversion decision at the end of 16 weeks or end of 6 months. So, that kind of onboarding process has a lot of commonality with the direct hire, where people are hired as employees from day one, but there are also some different pieces of it. So if you're in a returnship, you have to bake into that process when not only, that midpoint and endpoint check-in of the returnship period itself, but the managers need to do a midpoint evaluation, and then they need to make a conversion decision at the end. But I'd say that as an example, if an employer brings a cohort of people in who are starting the program at the career reentry program at the same time, each person does get assigned some sort of a mentor or a buddy, and sometimes both. The mentor may be a more senior person that helps the individual with introductions, or can be a sounding board, or is assisting the manager in some way in making the person feel comfortable and meeting with them on a regular basis. The buddy has a particular role. When someone's coming back in after a career break, there are confidence issues and learning curve issues that are unique to them. And that's why the orientation that we do right at the beginning, where we put all of this on the table, is really, really important. But the buddies, it has to be someone who is knowledgeable. This is where the returning professional is going to go to for all sorts of answers. And they have to be knowledgeable, they have to be patient, and they have to be non-judgmental. The person has to be able to react to any question that's thrown their way without any indication that there's judgment, and they're open and ready to respond. So I'd say, the stakeholders we really start with the recruiters, actually, but the managers themselves, the mentors, the buddies, the other people in the cohort. There's often a program manager who is an additional touch point and is meeting with people on a semi-regular basis. And there's, proprietary technical training modules that are part of it. And there's also usually a series of lunch and learns with different people in the organization who are talking about either their own career paths, or talking about the organization itself and its evolution, or how a particular area is fitting into what the larger organization does. So those are some of the features.
Thank you, Carol. Sophie, would you like to go next?
Sure. And I think a lot of kind of what Carrie mentioned about the body, the kind of mentor, right, and also building a community, really applies even in the senior leadership or executive onboarding, and it usually takes a lot more planning around onboarding a senior leader, especially someone that would bring in from outside, right? Because the success rate of bringing a new executive leader into a company is actually relatively low if it's not planned well. And just think about how much resource and time we just spend on that. So a couple of things that I found really, really helpful. I think the first one is, as a new executive, a new senior leader come into the company, right? The stage about the team's the forming stage and the storming phase, right, is even more critical, because when the leader comes in, people will want to understand what is the vision that they have for the organization they're leading. And the higher up the level is, the more people are watching the leaders, right, and wanting to hear more directions from them. So it's to really help them have a good gauge of the landscape they're walking in, but providing as much tribal knowledge, organizational knowledge as possible. The other part is also for the organization, the people in the organization they're leading, right? Because people usually are very excited and with a mixed emotion of anxious, not knowing what to expect when they have a new leader coming in. So it's really to give the team as much comfort as possible by having some time with this new leader. Sometimes it's through one-on-one, but sometimes it's through team meetings. Sometimes one-on-one is not very doable, consider the amount of time it's going to take. And so by running a new leader simulation, usually in the first month, and then the third month stage really helps the team as well as the leader to kind of gauge how the integration, right, the new leader into the organization goes. And one last thing I want to share is that also works really well is to have some, ask me anything sessions. Is really to elevate, right, the new leader's branding and, and also kind of their visibility across the broader organization, so people can feel like they can ask them, questions that they care about, either personal or professional or direction about the company. But it's really opened up that conversation channel to have a more authentic connection and, more, important kind of dialogues, the idea near to people's hearts.
Thank you, Sophie. Jamie.
Yeah, I really like the new leader assimilation and the Ask Me Anything sessions when it comes to hiring a new executive or a new department head. Going back to like the re-entry of people that have been out of the workforce for a little bit of time. One of the things I'm really passionate about when it comes to onboarding is how you can infuse quick wins into especially the first week or 2 weeks. And I think that's even more important when we have somebody that has been out of the workforce for a little while, regardless of what the situation was. As Carol mentioned, there's sometimes a confidence building that needs to happen. And the more that we can allow for people to have those opportunities for quick wins, or I'm not going to say, easy layups, but sometimes it's a couple of easy layups, that make people feel like, oh, I can do this. Okay, maybe I am right. So I think the appropriate way to do that is, what are those skills that you were leaning into that you found in that candidate that made you want to say, yes, this is the person that we're going to bring in? What were those key skills that you think that they're bringing into the organization, and how can you give them opportunities to show those key skills and their knowledge around those key skills, or their application of those key skills within a very short amount of time to help build that confidence?
I love that that easy win strategy. I think it's great. And I just want to add on to that one of the other things that we talk about in the orientation within the first 2 days is the learning curve. people familiar with it, it was, I think, Noel Birch in the 1970s created this 4 stages of learning, and to get people to understand that they're moving along a learning curve when they are starting out, and that's a natural part of the process. And so they it normalizes the idea that maybe, you know, it's you don't know what you don't know, then you realize what you don't know, and your learning can take a little dip at that point, and then you start being aware of figuring out what the solutions are, and that point, people feel vulnerable, and they say knowing that they're moving along the learning curve gives them confidence, because they know that it's not just them, it's just part of the process.
Thank you. Agostina.
Definitely, I am resonating with many of the elements shared by the rest of the panelists here. But for the sake of answering, Minola, you asked for a specific example. I would love to continue sharing a little bit more about the piloting experience we did at Eventbrite in the India and Spain markets, and especially considering the tech and product populations, since that was the most aggressive hiring we do in those regions. And so, as I said, we decided to pilot this experiment, and that consists of basically 4 phases. The first one starts with the pre-onboarding, actually, where the employee and the manager get via our technology some of the activities and resources and materials to go through prior to joining, actually, on day 1. The second phase is the orientation day, and it can be a week as well, depending on the seniority, on the role, on the nuance of the person being hired. But basically, during that orientation, the employee goes through the company onboarding, the organizational aspects that they need to know in regards to, from how to set up their systems to culture, values, and behaviors that the company promotes. And then step 3 is the functional onboarding. And needless to say, that a stakeholder that was very important in the designing of this project is definitely the chief of staff from the engineering and product departments, right? Because they would have an important place in supporting with the materials and resources for to equip the employees for success on the functional side. And then step 4 of this process would be the integration of the employee to the team, to the organization, and that is the whole process. And just to go a double click in it, I would love to mention a little bit of some of the moments of truth that happen within those 4 stages. So week 1, again, this is a time to set the success criteria, where leaders share what the success of the role should look like. They align expectations. Then it goes to day 14, where the leader identifies any potential barriers or blockers. There's a check-in to identify if there's anything happening or blocking the employee to effectively continue the onboarding experience. Then on day 30, there is a double click on the goal setting. So the leader and the new employee should be able to partner in setting their 90 and 180 goals. And this is a very important aspect that needs to happen to ensure success, and that the employee is effectively working and delivering on what he is expected to. And definitely it goes into day 60, where they do goal review, day 90, where they do another checkpoint, which replicates on day 120 and 180. And for the sake of time, I won't go more granular than this, but know that this entire process was built following an agile and human-centered design approach, which means that the business was also asked to participate in the design of this process. So they were asked, what does success in an onboarding process look like for you, and not necessarily for HR. Yeah,
that's wonderful. Thank you everyone for sharing all this. And most of you will probably recognize one of my signature questions, and that has to do with how can we make this conversation meaningful for those in our audience that live in the reality of an HR function of one. So for those who are in this position, I have a two-layered question. I wanted to say two questions, but a two-layered question. First, what are some of the most critical aspects that they should focus on when we look at the onboarding? And who and what can they leverage within the organization? And I'm asking this openly, like from allies to AI, anything goes. So how can we help people in our audience who are an HR function of one make the most and the most meaningful impact being involved in effective onboarding? And I would just let this go popcorn style wherever inspiration strikes. Jamie.
Well, I'm an HR department of one, so I can relate to the people in the audience that may be wondering this question. For me, I lean into the idea of customer service. And so that's a really broad idea, and it can be applied a lot of different ways. But when it comes down to how you handle being an HR department of one and being effective in all of the different areas, if you can lean into the idea of the service level that you're providing, I think it can make all the difference. And it doesn't have to be a big grandiose project. It doesn't have to be, the latest and greatest. It just has to be the best customer service in every aspect and every touch point along the way that you are capable of providing, or the business is capable of providing. There's a lot of ways that you can help improve your customer service levels. You can automate certain things. Sophie mentioned Donut. That's a great thing. We have that at Trust Radius. I love Donut. There's automation with AI. There's taking the time to put as much information into a repository place. Here's all the FAQs that you're going to have. Feel free to read through them, and then we can talk about them later. Wherever you can make an impact, wherever you can deliver high service, that's the area that you focus in on. As far as leveraging others in the organization, your hiring manager has to be your number one cohort, I think, when it comes to onboarding. But there's a lot of others. You want them to have a great digital experience. Leaning into your IT team. We're changing how we come into the workplace in a lot of ways, and there's a generational aspect to think about. So maybe when you're thinking about buddies and ambassadors within your organization, you can think from a generational cohort to help with that. There's ERGs that you can lean into to help with some of those specifics that may be to that individual, or that individual is passionate about. So as Sophie mentioned earlier, that it does take a village, and when you're an HR department of one, that is never a more true statement. So don't feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders alone. You've got a whole organization that can help back you up.
Thank you, Jamie. Sophie.
I just love what Jamie mentioned, right? It's really about building that ecosystem to broaden your village, right? you're not standing alone on your own island. It's really bringing people in and take that leadership, right? Like, how do you engage and empower, right? Like managers and new hires and other functionals to really be part of this ecosystem and leverage the power of AI, right? Like, there is a lot of companies that I know that are leveraging ChatGPT. So there is a lot of typical HR related questions that can be addressed through ChatGPT. So for the new hire, right, it's even a better experience if they are sitting in a different part of the world. It's waiting on you to provide information that they need. They can easily leveraging the power of AI, and that is a very personal and catered solution for them. The other thing is also about really empowering the managers around what are things that are critical for new hires, right? They want to understand what's expected of them. They appreciate timely feedback, because a lot of the work that we've seen around onboarding is that new hires are not getting just in time feedback. So how do you really empower the leaders? Because at the end of the day, right, you are transitioning the new hire, right, from hand holding to introducing them to their new family. So really, how do you build that alliance, empowering and educating leaders with tools in this ecosystem, so you're not taking on and sharing a lot of responsibilities by yourself?
I can add to that, Minola, and again, I'm resonating with Sophie and Jamie. I will add that, especially for remote organizations or just those that want to be more flexible and inclusive in the way they onboard their employees, I would definitely say that they have to leverage technology, and that there are today plenty of other systems that are not that costly, that can provide opportunities to do async consumption of that new hire, of the information and material they need to absorb. Because onboarding can be definitely be one of the most exciting experiences, but it can be also one of the most overwhelming experiences one person can go through. And so, if we allow for flexibility and for that employee to own and to consume on demand some of that pieces of the onboarding, it will definitely be something that can, again, can promote a more diverse and inclusive environment. So using technology such as Confluence or Drive, or the caveat here is to have a unique source of truth. So it's not generating tons and tons of places where they have to, again, go find the information, but rather have a unique place where you place the information for the employee to consume on demand. Yeah, so definitely that's something that I want to add.
And I just want to address the comment in the chat about onboarding managers not thinking that they have the bandwidth to onboard. As an HR department of one, they're probably not going to get a lot of sympathy about bandwidth. But more importantly, if they don't spend the time and figure out their bandwidth for onboarding, then they're going to be in a continuous cycle of interviewing. So they can make the choice on how they want to spend their time.
Thank you, Jamie. Carol.
Yeah, Amy, that's a great point. I'm building on something that Agustina was talking about, just as an example. So we have an intensive orientation, and it's like it's 2 hours, and we usually deliver it with the group, and the program manager could do a version of it. But there are parts of it that we have turned into e-learning. So there is e-learning can be really effective in describing certain confidence building, imposter syndrome, the learning curve, and interacting with and conversation starters, and networking recommendations, and even certain etiquette in terms of how you present yourself virtually, for example. And there's a lot of curated aspects of that, podcasts or articles or worksheets that are worked into that. And it works perfectly as an asynchronous device, as Agostina was saying, but also pairing that, if you're one person, with group activities. I'm going to just assume they have to be virtual, but like live virtual group activities. So again, as an example, one of the things that we do is we think once people are inside the organization, they need to have a brand new elevator pitch about themselves as opposed to the one that got them there. So there's a sort of workshop-y kind of exercise that we bring people through in order to create that new elevator pitch, and then do the initial practicing of it and realize how much they have to practice it more. And so that's a perfect part of the onboarding that can be done in a virtual group online, and put people into breakout rooms and let them practice with each other. And you're one person, but you can do that periodically in groups. So I think it's group activities combined with e-learning.
Well, we are in the final 5 minutes, which is a very painful thing to say. I feel like we could go on for at least another 5 hours on this topic. But I would invite each of you take 1 minute and share with us on your journey, what is one thing that you learned that fundamentally changed your understanding of the importance of onboarding? Is it a moment? Is it a story? Is it a personal experience? The only request I do have from you is to make it value dense. And I will give you a few seconds to think about it. Just a big thank you to everybody listening and watching, and also a big thank you for the incredible engagement we've seen in the chat. That's always so inspiring and so gratifying for everybody on stage. Now, we will do this clockwise, and I will pass the e-mic around. Carol, something that profoundly impacted your take on onboarding.
It actually had to do with what the exit interview looks like and the offboarding process, and then how that impacts what has to happen on the other side. Because going forward, we think people are going to take more career breaks because their careers are going to be longer, like 60 years instead of 40, because they're going to live to 100. And so there's going to be a continuing process of offboarding and onboarding. And it's really both parts of the cycle that are influence each other and impact each other.
Thank you so very much. Sophie.
Yeah, I think we all have more memories about some painful experiences we do have in the past. So yeah, I think it's oftentimes not to assume, right, when we bring someone in, everything's going to go smooth. It is, I've had several experiences where we had to, exit some new hires because the onboarding didn't go well. And it was all parties, right, involved in the manager responsibility and just not having that, smooth and well built out ecosystem. So I think that's really critical to make sure that you have the right ecosystem, regardless you're a team of 1 or you're a team of 100, right? Like having that in place is so critical to make sure that new hires can come in and thrive and get nurtured in this new environment.
Thank you, Sophie. Jamie.
Well, I definitely had a good bad example when I was younger in my career, and had a manager on my first day give me a report that was way too intimidating and said, "I'm not really good at training. I'm going to show you how to log in, and then this is the report I need you to run through, and let me know if you have any questions." And I was like, okay, well, I'm good at figuring stuff out, so I'm going to jump in here. But it also gave me that jumping point of, this is not what I want others to experience. So if I ever have an opportunity to influence it differently, I would influence it differently. And so there's not a lot of ways you can get worse from that, but there's a whole lot of ways that you can get better. And so I always think back to that being the starting point of my passion for onboarding. And I love this manager to this day, and she and I still stay connected, and she knows that she's a bad trainer. But we have good conversations around that might not be the best approach, and here's some other things that you could do instead. So
Thank you, Jamie. Agostina.
Yeah, so I was fortunate to participate in some great onboardings in the last couple of years. And I think some of the elements they have in common are three. One, I could see that those were planned onboarding and there was investment of time and resources put in place for me to be able to leverage it the right way. The second element was definitely personalization. So there was, again, a lot of thinking and thoughtfulness and commitment into the plan, the onboarding plan, so that it could work specifically for me and what I was expected to bring in terms of results to the organization. And the third element was definitely including peers, including other stakeholders. So the element of relationship building and stressing how important that is to the success of the right integration for me in the organization. So hoping that if I ever have to design, or if I did when I was supporting some of these organizations, I would definitely have this into consideration.
Carol, Sophie, Jamie, and Agostina, thank you so very much for taking the time and the energy and just sheer generosity of sharing your insights and your passion for the topic. Deeply, deeply, and truly appreciated. Also, thank you everybody in the audience. Thank you, Jessa, and I hope I will get to welcome as many of you as possible very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank
thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.